3 minutes after 10. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we find ourselves looking at both the B word and the F word again today. Perhaps somewhat earlier than I expected to. You will know, if you are kind enough to listen to this programme on a remotely regular basis, that we got hip to Jacob Rees-Mogg's jive many, many moons ago. And to see his, what would you describe it as? His sort of mask. It's not even a mask. To see him fall apart publicly when asked about why the situation for the fishermen of the United Kingdom is currently so dire, when the only reason left for Brexit by the end of the 4.5-year saga was that it'd be good for the fish. It'd be good for fishermen. How do you process this? It's very like Donald Trump in the sense that there is absolutely no pleasure whatsoever in seeing what many of us considered to be inevitable unfold. All of the people that were vile and shouted abuse and took to Twitter to launch all manner of bullying campaigns or abusive campaigns or whatever you want to call them. Those of us on the receiving end of that sort of thing, of course, in my case, right up from newspaper owners down, but in the case of ordinary people who don't have the privilege of a platform like this, you just get it usually from social media or possibly from family and friends. And we stood there for years, just quietly saying, hang on a minute, I think this is just true. Almost as if I'm not sure reality cares about referendum results. I don't think you can vote your way out of the 21st century. And as with Trump, there's a bit of pride involved in that nobody wants to be wrong 100%, but it would be insane to want to be right when what you're predicting is either fascism in America or economic damage and worse in your own country. You think that you're right, but you want to be wrong. And you almost, I think, feel a little bit of guilt now, or I do at least, because our warnings didn't work. I know that's probably a bit silly. I'm being all Catholic now with a large C, aren't I? Because what chance did we ever have against Rupert Murdoch and the Barclay brothers and the Daily Mail? And I mean, what chance did anybody? It's a miracle we got as much as 48%. And most of us didn't even wake up to what a ridiculous idea Brexit was until the ship had sailed. That's why we put our shoulders to the wheel on a second referendum, and that failed. That failed horribly, dismally, never got close. Well, it maybe got close. But you still sit there, and even now I find myself hoping here is a problem with food supply or with fish or with musicians that want to tour in Europe or with companies that want to deliver into the single market. Here are myriad problems, and I really want them to be temporary. I want the experts and the people who understand things to undo the damage as quickly as possible that has been done by those who deride experts and who celebrate their failure to understand things. I really do. And, you know, it's so hard with footballification, with everybody so desperate, or with half of the country still so desperate to pretend that things are going to be great, that you just have to be better than them. You have to want things to get better. You winning the argument. I think the Brexit argument is actually over already. For me, it ended with the abolition of your freedom of movement. I felt that was the point at which, you know, everybody realises that for generations now we have diminished our own existence, our own freedom, our own ability to, you know, go and work as a bricklayer in Berlin or to study at the Sorbonne. People will still be able to do that, but it will be harder than it was before. And not as many people will be able to do it. So you have this curious contradiction almost. It's a dissonance of sorts. You see the stuff happening that you thought would happen because people that work in the sectors explained it to you, you know, whether it's an international courier or whether it's an international freight forwarding company or whether it's a greengrocer or whether it's the fish. I feel really sorry for the fishermen, actually. I know a lot of you don't. I've been looking at some of the messages that started coming into the studio while Nick was talking about this. But I'm sorry, and I don't think I ever will join you in saying it serves them right, or they got what they voted for. They didn't. They were lied to. And my hashtag, it popped up about 3 years ago or 2 years ago, contempt for the conmen, compassion for the conned. And the fishermen, as it stands, seem to be at the very front of the queue of people who have been conned. British fishermen, the Times reports today, have accused Boris Johnson of dishonesty and betrayal over his Brexit fishing deal. I allow myself the occasional, all right? So if only someone had warned them that Boris Johnson had a track record full of dishonesty and betrayal, eh? If only somebody had pointed that out to the fishermen. But you don't want them to fail. I mean, there's no argument. There's no argument in the world so important that I'd want your business to go bust in order that I could win that argument. There really isn't. It's just stupid. Sorry, guys. It's stupid to sit here saying serves you right. It simply it doesn't serve anybody right. And it's the people who, I'm afraid, fell into traps or fell into myths perpetrated and perpetuated by people like Jacob Rees-Mogg. It's the people that fell for it that are going to suffer. He's not going to suffer. His fund, the fund he founded, had opened an outlet in Ireland long before the withdrawal agreement was, long before they passed, not long before he unlawfully prorogued Parliament, long before Johnson unlawfully prorogued Parliament and Jacob Rees-Mogg misled the Queen. I mean, these people, when someone tells you who they are, believe them the first time. DFDS, a transport company which consolidates smaller shipments into truckloads for export, halted its operations last week after delays in getting on top of the new customs paperwork. So that's what I would file under fixable. Do you see what I mean? The problem is that people voted to remove red tape. And now we're learning that some of the problems caused by Brexit are the result of all the new red tape. I mean, I think you can probably tell from my voice, let alone my vocabulary this morning, that I'm genuinely befuddled. I'm genuinely sort of gobsmacked at this. It's as if everybody is suddenly pointing out that the Emperor has got no clothes on, and you're standing in a crowd next to people. There was a bloke in the Mail yesterday, a columnist who I generally rather like, and he was writing about how outrageous it is that British truckers are having their sandwiches confiscated at the Dutch border when a non-EU country like Switzerland sees the trucks pass in and out freely. It doesn't. The customs posts in Switzerland shut for the weekend. We had it explained to us years ago by a chap called Kieran, and it's just true. It's just reality. The Emperor had no clothes on, and even now, 2 weeks into January, good columnist in the Daily Mail writing about how unfair it is. Schengen. Switzerland is in the single market, effectively, due to a bunch of bilaterals, and it is also in the Schengen area. So, essentially, a country that has freedom of movement with the EU is being held up by pro-Brexit newspapers as an example of what we should have been like, even though we've abolished freedom of movement. It's utterly, utterly baffling to me that this is continuing. I don't know what needs to happen next. Do we need to have a Donald Trump-type moment in order for people to say, oh, yeah, all right, sorry? So where do we start today? The National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations has accused Boris Johnson of signing up to a neo-colonial relationship with the EU on fish for long into the future. This isn't me. This isn't some metropolitan elite Ramona, if you still subscribe to those ludicrous labels. This is the National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations. And they have said to the Prime Minister everything that you and others at the very top of government told us, and also told Parliament, and also told the general public, led us to believe that your stance on fishing was not just rhetoric or expedience, but was based around a principle. That proved not to be the case. And I don't know how you shuck this oyster. Because it's so huge All that was left at the end was fish. Do you remember when I started saying to you in about early 2017, all they'll have left is blue passports and fish? And it turned out we could have had blue passports anyway, and we've got them, but they're not that blue and they're made in Poland. Hashtag winning. So all that was left was fish. And still, we'd take calls from people in the industry. Still, they would insist that it's all worth it because of the fish. And now the national organisation, the National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations, is calling foul. Could they have secured something better? I personally don't think so, actually. But they haven't. And remember, they were telling you it was brilliant on Christmas Eve, while the Fisheries Minister was too busy organising a nativity to actually read the thing. How bad does it have to get? I'm not expecting letters of apology or queues outside the studio of people wearing sackcloth and ashes, self-flagellating upon the altar of my rectitude. I just want to help the fishermen. I'm not sure we can. John Redwood says we can. John Redwood says there's plenty we can do to help. But it all goes to a different school. So where are we? How do we tell the difference? Well, first of all, I don't know if we've done this before. You're in the fishing industry. Give me a call. What's going on? All right? 0345 6060973. And then we'll throw our net. God, I just can't help it, can I? We'll cast our net a little wider because I can't imagine I'm going to be bombarded with calls from people in the fishing industry. I hope I am. The phone lines are open. If you know someone, tell them there's a line free into the studio. Yeah, line, casting my net. 0345 6060973. Let's open up the phone lines, see what bites. Then we may cast our net a little wider and look at some of these other issues. Your business now is beginning to get a clear idea of what Brexit means. And I would quite like you to tell me. Okay? So, look, I don't know if this is silly. I went into the fishmongers yesterday and it looked great. I bought myself a bag of mussels. So there is still... No, that is just silly. The industry. You work in the industry. What's going on? And... anyone can answer this question, but I can't. So don't feel embarrassed if you can't. How are we going to tell the difference between the stuff that can be fixed, the stuff that's happening now that's a result of the Vote Leave government's incompetence and dishonesty, and the stuff that can't actually be fixed because it is a permanent consequence of Brexit, at least in its current form? How do we tell the difference between the problems caused by incompetence, the incompetence of our Vote Leave government, and how do we tell the difference between that and the problems caused by leaving? 0345 6060973 is the number you need. It's 10:16.
This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation. LBC with James O'Brien.
20 minutes after 10 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. James, you can carry on having compassion for the conned, but I feel the fishermen and other Brexiters deserve whatever betrayal this government metes out to them. Remember, we were all conned with their lies, but how come some of us didn't buy those lies and others did? Personally, I do not feel sorry for the fishermen. It serves them right. Well, Abby, that sadly puts you in the position of deriving pleasure from other people's misfortune, which I would argue is never a good path to go down. And it also, I don't think it counts as a lie until it's proven to be wrong. So you can't say you believe... Well, maybe you can. I don't know. That may be a conversation we should have today as well. The notion of Schadenfreude, the notion of not having compassion for the con. I'm going to carry on doing so, but I'm not going to insist that you do or necessarily even judge you too harshly if you feel that you can't. But it's just so... It's so sort of... I can't quite believe how totemic it is on the fish front. That was the one thing. Even I thought that it made some sense, actually. I didn't understand how much of our quotas were carried by foreign fleets. I didn't understand how much of our market was overseas, was in the European Union. I didn't understand the full scale of the two-way traffic. I didn't understand the importance of processing. So, fish processing suffers now that Scottish trawlers are landing in Denmark to avoid EU red tape. But I did think there was a logic to the the notion of controlling our waters. We didn't get a great deal on fishing quotas when we joined the common market. It was one of the things where we did a bit of giving. In other areas, we did the taking, but that was one of the areas where you could conceivably have improved things if, and I think this is the point I missed, if you viewed it all in isolation, if you didn't see it as being all linked, give and take. So you win in one area, you lose in another. It's compromise. It's negotiation. So now we have fishermen queuing up to complain. I guess I'm asking, how do you respond to that? And because I genuinely mean it, nobody wants to see businesses go under. How do we tell the difference between problems caused by government incompetence and problems caused by the reality of Brexit? I currently don't know, but we're going to work it out together. Larry's in Bury St Edmunds. Larry, what do you think?
I don't think that the sort of Brexit schadenfreude is the only reason that someone would be happy that fishermen are suffering currently.
Go on.
So from my own perspective, I see them as poachers and people that go out and catch what we already own from public waters and then sell it back to us.
Right.
I don't really agree with that.
There's nothing to stop you going out and catching your own fish, is there?
No, not at all.
So what's the complaint then?
Well, I don't go and sell that to anyone else, and I don't get people to make a governmental decision based on it.
No, but I don't have time to go fishing, so I'll pay for someone else's time.
Yeah, you can do. That's up to you if you want to do that.
It's up to you as well if you want to do that.
Yeah, definitely. But that
I'm not sure you thought this through, Larry. Have you?
No, I can be happy that some people are suffering for having an unscrupulous job.
Just run me why it's an unscrupulous job again?
Do you agree with poaching?
Well, who owns the seas?
We do, the
right.
public.
Yes, and I haven't got time
land,
to go fishing. I haven't got time to go and catch mussels today, so I'm going to pay someone to do it for me, and then I will eat the mussels.
That's not the process how it works, is it?
Right,
These people are going out and poaching the fish and selling it back to you, or they're throwing it in the sea and decimating the wildlife in there.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, how much are you enjoying the sight of fishermen facing bankruptcy?
From a non-Brexit schadenfreude perspective, I would say 7 out of 10.
Okay. I mean, it may be that I've misunderstood you, in which case I apologise.
No. You
but
haven't.
it sounds like a load of old scallops. Gordon's in Aberdeen. Gordon, what would you like to say?
I've been listening to your comments, James.
Yes.
Sorry, although I'm from Aberdeen, I explained to your researcher my background and the reason why I'm phoning
Yes.
is that I originate from a small town called Peterhead. You've maybe heard of it.
I have, yes.
Major white fishing port, probably at its height, the biggest fishing port in Europe. It maybe still is, despite what's happening. I have a couple of comments to make.
Please.
I know that in general terms you are a Remainer. I think that's clear to everybody.
No, not anymore, mate. It's not an option.
Well, you're not a Remainer in that the country has left.
I was a
And you're
Remainer,
saying,
but
yes,
that ship sailed, I think, in December of last...
Well,
2019.
I'm afraid for you perhaps,
Yes.
but not for us in Scotland.
Okay.
Which,
Well, no, I'm sorry, this is a bit semantic. Hang on. This is a bit semantic. Returner, you're a rejoiner. We have now left. You can't remain in something you've already
I
left.
have no desire for the UK to rejoin. What the UK decides to do is up to the UK. The UK, after what I want to happen, will change in form, and whether it is still the UK.
No, for sure.
Know.
Let me just nudge you towards the headline of your call, if I may, Gordon.
Well, there are two.
Yes.
That is a subsection of it. I'm just making the point. You're saying it from a paradigm of the UK.
I listen. When I suggest that you might hurry up and you talk about subsections and paradigms, I think we're on slightly different pitches here.
No, we're not. We're on the same pitch.
Right.
Sorry, I'm not trying to be facetious.
No, nor am I. I'm just trying to hurry you up a bit and get you to the central points that you want to make.
The two central points are: we, as a country, that country is Scotland, voted 62%.
Yes, I know all this. I know all
on
this.
average to remain.
Yes.
Every single constituency, including the fishing constituencies.
Yes, absolutely.
It wasn't 62%. That was the average. In some constituencies, by definition, it was an awful lot higher.
Gordon, what is your point, my friend?
Had the fishermen known that they were going to be lied to and sold down the river by the Tory government, I think the average would have been a lot higher than 62%.
Right. Well, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Also, the Pope's a Catholic. Josh is in Jersey. Josh, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. I'm a commercial fisherman in Jersey.
Right.
I'm 28 years old. I've been fishing since I was about sort of 20. And I basically catch like ethical seafood, so I hand dive for scallops.
Yes.
We don't do any sort of trawling or dredging. We catch things on a low impact level. Jersey had a massive advantage. We had a thing called the Bay of Granville Treaty, which was basically thrown out when Brexit happened, and we had a chance to renegotiate our sort of waters and shared areas that we have with the French fishing fleet.
Yes.
However, nothing happened. The French basically don't now allow us to land our fish in. They're very aggressive towards any sort of Jersey boats that sort of try and land their shellfish. It's very sort of daunting to be looked down upon from the harbour walls by some French fishermen. And basically we had a chance to kick them out of our waters by our Jersey Fisheries Department, but it remained we had a 3-mile limit. Guernsey renegotiated a 6-mile limit. We got a 3-mile limit from our coastline. We own a couple of reefs outside of Jersey, one situated 7 miles to the north and one situated about 12 miles to the south. They're owned by Jersey. Right. The limit should have been set 3 miles from those areas, and we didn't get that. So now,
why? I mean, you know a lot more about this than I do. So forgive me if my ignorance is weapons grade. But I think you would have been happier to carry on as you were than you are with what you now have.
Yeah, I mean that it's kind of been the same, to be honest with you. But it would have been better. Jersey, the fleet in Jersey at the moment is pretty hard up. Most of the boats have sailed. Our catches have gone down. This would have given the fleet a massive boost and also given us some security for the future. We could have maybe caught more because we would be competing against less boats. And although it would have been hard to land into our main market of France, we could have had an opportunity to save our fleet.
Well, hang on. I don't want to get too bogged down in the finer detail. But you seemed a little glib there when you talked about the difficulties of landing. Your main market is France. So this is what I mean about the give and take that perhaps many commentators didn't understand. It's all very well talking about catching fish, but where are you going to sell it? And without single market membership or customs union membership, selling it into the European Union becomes considerably harder than it was right up until midnight on New Year's Eve.
Yeah, correct. I mean, basically, as soon as that day came in, the guys that land into France, they now have to fill out 6 pieces of paperwork. I don't do that because I land all my stuff in Jersey and it stays sort of local.
Does it? So you only really sell to customers in the Channel Islands?
Yeah.
Okay.
I basically set out I do home deliveries to all people.
Oh,
so we do lobsters, crabs.
What's the name of your company?
Scallops.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't live in Jersey.
Well,
so tell me the name anyway. Jersey Cat. So listen.
We had some really good. Yeah, go on, James. Sorry.
Well, I'm just confused.
Yeah, we had some good customers in London as well because of what we're doing. It's so sort of niche, and people want that sort of seafood, which we are doing. We were doing like home deliveries and stuff in London, but COVID put an end to that. But you know, it's for the bigger guys that catch a lot more than me and a lot better fishermen than me. They need that export to continue, but it has been made harder.
So how do you tell the difference? And I'm late for the news, so very quickly, how do you tell the difference between problems that have been caused by the Vote Leave government's incompetence and failure to prepare and problems that are what you might more loosely describe as permanent consequences of Brexit?
I mean, to be honest, it's all up in the air still. Like, we don't know what's going on. No one knows what's going on, James, still. So to answer that question, it's pretty hard. And
when Jacob Rees-Mogg's talking about British fish being happier, how does that... I presume it doesn't warm the cockles of your heart.
No, it doesn't. I think the fishermen, they do need a lot more than they're getting. They do need a lot more help and support. Otherwise, it will end. But
this was the one benefit. Well, there you say, apocalyptic was. I obviously hope not. But this is incredible. It was the one area which they kept returning to. And it's the first casualty in many ways. I struggle to see quite how they get away with it, to be honest with you. 10:32 is the time. Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
10:36 is the time. Colin is in Belmont. James, you should offer an apology for misleading people for years. Oh, okay, Colin. You claimed that blue passports and fish would end up being the only benefits of Brexit. This clearly needs to be corrected to blue passports only. I don't know that I'm prepared to issue an apology at this point in proceedings. I do know, though, that in many ways Josh has answered my question, which has blown something of a hole in the notion of treating it as a phone-in show. It is not currently possible, even, I suspect, for fishermen, to tell the difference between problems that are caused mostly by the incompetence of the Vote Leave government and their failure properly to prepare, explain, or perhaps even understand the consequences of the so-called deal that they unveiled on Christmas Eve, and problems that we're currently seeing in the industry that are caused by Brexit itself and therefore become more permanent. So, it's the difference between having new paperwork to fill in and not yet being very good at filling it in, and having doors shut in your face that until New Year's Eve, until New Year's Day of this year were wide open. So I don't know the difference, and at the moment it seems quite a lot of fishermen don't either. The National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations is pretty clear on how badly they've been let down, betrayed and misled. You have tried to present the agreement as a major success when it is patently clear that it is not. You were forced to concede in the face of an intransigent and powerful opponent that has caused such fury across our industry. So the fishermen, many ways, somewhat to my surprise, are at the front of the queue of people waking up perhaps to the reality of Brexit. But they don't know the difference, which is kind of incredible, isn't it? Between the problems caused by people like Jacob Rees-Mogg not knowing not knowing what day it is, frankly, and the problems caused by people like Jacob Rees-Mogg selling Brexit to a population without actually understanding what it was they were selling. We're almost back to yesterday's what's in the box territory again, aren't we? So anyway, speaking of the J-Dog, here he is insulting pretty much every fisherman that's ever lived.
The fishing issue was covered a moment ago by my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and perhaps the honourable gentleman should have tuned into that debate rather than bringing it up at business questions. But what is happening is that the government is tackling this issue, is dealing with it as quickly as possible, and the key is we've got our fish back. They're now British fish, and they're better and happier fish for it.
Obviously, there's overwhelming evidence for that. Let's empty Mansfield with Ben Bradley.
So I like Lindsay Hoyle. I think he's a good speaker, but I don't think that's funny. I think it's, it's not a sort of po-faced, holier-than-thou, stern response, but I think the fact that he would make a joke about this while the National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations is almost describing an existential threat to the entire industry, I think it's tragic. It may be tragicomedy, but it is... it is the new reality. Just play the short version again, because this is... Well, actually, play the clip 4, the Loch Fyne fisherman, the shorter, because this is the reality of what these people are facing.
My blood is boiling. There's boats tied up. There's families, fishing boats tied up. We can't get our product to the EU market because of red tape. We've been made a fool of.
And this is Jacob Rees-Mogg, one of the key salesmen of Brexit, reflecting upon the plight that gentleman just described.
The government is tackling this issue, is dealing with it as quickly as possible, and the key is we've got our fish back. They're now British fish, and they're better and happier fish for it.
See, there's something quite special happening here, isn't there? That is one of those moments where reality becomes unignorable, and when presented with unignorable reality, Jacob Rees-Mogg reaches for really bad jokes and insults. So this is the reality, currently, of being a post-Brexit British fisherman.
My blood is boiling. There's boats tied up. There's families, fishing boats tied up. We can't get our product to the EU market because of red tape. We've been made a fool of.
And this is Jacob Rees-Mogg, Brexit cheerleader, responding to that gentleman's obvious plight.
The government is tackling this issue, is dealing with it as quickly as possible, and the key is we've got our fish back. They're now British fish, and they're better and happier fish for it.
Yeah, it's really funny, that. Hilarious. Well done, J-Dog. When are you going to answer the question? When are you going to tell us what the actual measures are that could improve the situation for the fishing industry? I do not know. So let's bring farmers into the mix as well, and the question of Schadenfreude. How do you respond to my suggestion that taking pleasure in the plight of these people who voted for a project that was, for many of us, always destined to doom them, is pointless? Schadenfreude is pointless. Compassion for the con, contempt for the con men. Tell me why you don't agree on 0345 6060 973. Ranjit's in Oldbury. You're in the fishing game, Ranjit, but not necessarily from the angle, see what I did there, that I was expecting.
Good morning, James.
Hello.
Yeah, I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg probably needs to understand that sarcasm is the lowest form of wit. Yeah,
I'm not even sure he was being sarcastic, was he? I think if you think about it in the terms of what you're left with when reality has arrived at the table, all he can do is try and stick little Union flags in fish and claim that that's some sort of victory.
Are they walking around with British passports now then? Or swimming around, should I say?
I know.
Can I just quote something for... Jacob Rees-Mogg from a Clint Eastwood film, with him coming out with all this stuff. Don't pee on my back and tell me it's raining. He's the one from the ERG group, just before Brexit, moved his company to Ireland.
That's not quite true. They opened a new kind of fund so that they could continue to operate within European Union auspices. But I mean, with love and respect, I don't need much help getting the measure of Jacob Rees-Mogg, but I don't know Ranjit in Oldbury as well as I know him. So where do you come at this from? Where are you?
Okay, what I'm saying is about all these people that are saying that the fishermen deserve it. Yeah. Now the cheap meal for a working man used to be fish and chips. On a Friday night.
Still is.
I'm sure everybody went and got fish and chips. Well, I can tell you, I've been in the game now 14 years,
right? And
the fish price has tripled in 14 years. Yeah. The working man now...
But that could be an argument for leaving.
It should have come down. The price should have come down. And why hasn't it come down? That was the one thing that it affects... what they said is the industry is only worth like 0.1%, but it affects 99% of the population because they are the ones that consume the goods and they are paying through the nose at the moment. And everybody who's in my game is struggling selling fish. All we're doing is kebabs and chips and stuff like that. And it should be a right of our people to be able to eat fish.
I think 80% of the cod that is sold in this country has been landed by French fishermen. I think I read that. Obviously, this is all from the top of my head. So here's the problem, Ranjit, very briefly. Do you feel that the fishermen should have seen this coming? I mean, some of us were screaming from the rooftops that trusting Boris Johnson never ends well, or do you feel that they are victims as opposed to complicit?
What's happened over the last few years in politics? The politicians try and find somebody else to blame, and then they get people to focus in on their vibes, and then they vote for that. So they're charlatans, all these politicians at the moment. What they did was they told everybody, if you leave Europe, this is what's going to happen to you. So I'm expecting every morning when I ask for what the price of the fish is, it hasn't come down.
No, I never saw it as necessarily being a plan to bring down the price of fish. I just thought that more of the fish being sold would see the money going into the pockets of British fishermen, and I could see how at first glance that made sense. But when you dug into how the quotas were divvied up, how processing plays a part, and how what we eat and what we catch are miles and miles apart, the wisdom of having it done under some sort of community scheme became clear. But here we are. You misled us over Brexit deal. Angry fishermen tell Johnson. It's 10:45.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC with James O'Brien.
It's 10:49. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It is actually quite shocking to reflect upon the fact that it's the fishing industry that in many ways has come out earliest in opposition to the consequences of Boris Johnson's Brexit. Whether or not there was a Brexit available that would have made them happier, I don't know. It seems possible or plausible, but the rhetorical impact of this letter from the National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations is considerable. They are furious. And you seem more concerned this morning with the question of whether or not I'm right in suggesting that they don't deserve derision or schadenfreude. And I may move the conversation in that direction shortly. But first of all, the question is, and has been, how do you tell the difference between... And everybody should want all the problems to be in the first category, all right? All problems, hopefully, have been caused by the Vote Leave government's incompetence and failure to prepare. However, some problems have probably been caused by the ignored consequences or unbelieved consequences of Brexit. How do you tell the difference between a temporary fixable problem, albeit one that will involve a lot more red tape as a result of a project that was sold to you as a way of removing red tape, and problems that are unfixable under the current terms and conditions of that deal? I genuinely don't know. I'm not sure anyone does, actually, which is why perhaps some of the contributions today have been a tad surreal, because if it's a question that nobody can answer, then that, in a way, is an answer in itself. So the pressure is on you, Simon in Sevenoaks. Can you answer it?
No, probably not, James, but...
Well, have a go. Go on.
I know what I voted for. I voted for independence. I voted for sovereignty. I voted for accountability of the politicians who make the decisions.
Can I just steer you back to the fish? Would you mind?
Yeah, but this is the whole point, isn't it? It's about the fish.
Yes.
Because...
So how have the fishermen ended up being so angry?
No, if I can finish, James.
Well, no, mate, we've got to be having the same conversation.
Is that I believe that my politicians should dictate what trawlers catch what fish in our waters.
Right.
Okay.
And
so
do you understand?
Is that not fair?
Do you
Is that
understand?
not reasonable?
Do you understand why that was impossible now?
Why is it impossible?
Because
I don't understand why it's impossible.
Because the massive majority of the fish that we eat is caught by foreign fleets.
Yeah, because of our EU membership of the Common Fisheries Policy, our fishing fleet was decimated over the last 30 years.
Right.
Wasn't it?
Let me try again, okay? Why do you think the National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations is so furious?
Because there's increased bureaucracy, there's increased paperwork, because the European Union are smarting and they're finding it difficult to accept common terms for accepting our fish that they used to accept before.
Okay, so no, the point is the paperwork is for people that aren't members of the single market or the customs union. And
we're not members of the single market or the customs union, so
correct.
We're an
so the paperwork,
state, are we not?
The paperwork is an inevitable consequence of leaving the European Union.
Yeah, but fair enough. There's got to be parity on quality, surely. We start from a level playing field.
These words don't mean anything.
Why is it differentiated over the course of one day?
Yes.
Why is it so different?
Because if you were to resign your membership of a club today, tomorrow your relationship with that club would be very different. Do you see that, Simon?
Yeah, I totally see that.
Right, so that's the answer to your question about one day.
But when we have the same standards, James...
Yes.
Why are they refusing to accept a consumable good that they want to eat, they want to buy...
Because frictionless trade... I don't know if these questions are rhetorical. I can answer all of these questions, but the answer is essentially the same.
Answer them, then.
Okay, so the benefits of membership are confined to members.
Yeah, but we've got parity with the members, haven't we?
No, we are not members. You can only have parity with a member
if standards
once again, Simon, I can help you to understand all this if you genuinely want to. If you want to keep saying...
explain, James.
Okay.
I mean, because our standards are exactly the same as theirs. And in fact, our environmental standards are far higher than those of the European Union.
So the benefits of membership with regard to trade are confined to members. We are no longer a member, so the benefit of friction... Okay, you carry on, Simon.
So where is the equivalence? The equal recognition that should be there, shouldn't it?
So you thought just to be clear, because I'm genuinely trying to help you, although I'm increasingly worrying that you're not genuinely in seek of help in understanding all this stuff.
Don't be offensive, James. Just tell it like it is, man.
Well, I have done several times, and it's fair to say that I haven't buttered many parsnips yet, but on we go, onwards and upwards.
When you call a Dell Technologies advisor, you get to talk to someone who isn't waiting for their turn to speak, but who actually wants to hear what you have to say, so they can provide tailored solutions that don't fit every small business. They fit yours. That's what it means to really listen. For advice on everything from laptops to the cloud, Dell Technologies recommends Windows 10 Pro for Business, the most secure Windows ever. Call an advisor today on 0800 169 1745 or visit dell.co.uk/advisor.
Simon, so you thought that when we left the European Union, nothing would change?
No, I didn't think
that.
So
what did you think then? With regard to the fishing industry?
I thought a lot would change.
What were you expecting?
But what I thought that was we'd have a fair deal in accordance with the European law. We had
to make our own laws.
We'd have the same standards they'd accept the standards that we already exist, that we already.
So what's gone wrong? Do you think?
I thought those.
I know how she feels. I really do. Is that what do you think's gone wrong?
I think there's a lot of frustration and there's a lot of pride on both sides.
Yeah. What do you think's gone wrong?
What has gone
That's just
wrong
for the benefit of listeners. That's not my head on the desk. That's something in the background where Simon is. So
that's my autistic son.
What do you think's gone wrong? Well, I'll tell you what, mate. You go and look after him, Simon, mate. And I wish you all the very best. Seriously. 10:56 is the time. Charlie is in Dumfries. Charlie.
Hi there, James.
Hello.
For speaking to you. These fishermen have basically been done up like kippers.
Go on.
I had the exact same information available to me to make my decision on the European Union.
Yeah, but this is the argument that I want to have. All right, so because
no, I don't want to have an argument with you because you will win.
Yeah, well, that's not necessarily true. Seriously, but the whole thing behind compassion for the contempt for the con man is a direct result of me doing this job throughout the. Post-Brexit period, much more than the pre-Brexit period.
I understand that, James.
And they were not. There are some exceptions. I've spoken to some really nasty characters over, but most of them. And I think Simon, the last caller, fits into this category. I can't.
Yep, definitely.
I can't blame them for believing professionally plausible snake oil salesmen.
But do you think it was? Do you think they were believing it, or do you think that they were just out for their own gain and not caring about what happened to anybody else? I mean, I was training to be a pilot, right?
Yeah.
And I needed to have be a member of the EU to be able to work, travel, and live freely within the European Union. Now, I live in Scotland, and that's been completely taken away from me now. So I spent tens of thousands of pounds doing this, and now I can't follow.
But aren't you now?
choices.
Are you not being a bit guilty of what you accuse them of? So you're seeing it entirely through the lens of your own.
No, but I'm having to deal with their actions.
Yeah, you are.
You know what I mean? So
they've muffed they've messed up your life, and it's a little bit rich of me to ask you to have sympathy for the fact that they've accidentally messed up their own lives as well.
And that's my point. I mean,
and that's why I would not have won this argument. I don't think, because it's. Can I try a two wrongs don't make a right? Is that going to butter any parsnips on this one?
Definitely not.
No, I think you're probably right.
Not on this one. But I do have. I mean, I have not arguments. I have debates on Facebook all the time with people regarding this, and I'm like that. Well, we all had our own reasons for voting the way that we did.
Yes.
But if it's come back to bite them in the proverbial, that's not my problem. They've got to deal with that.
But it is your problem. It's all of our problem, isn't it?
Not really, because I'm having to deal with my own problems. So I'm not going to deal with their problem.
And when they say well, what about if imagine a little old lady who's fallen for one of those, and I know that's a bit patronising perhaps, but
no, but there's been so many of them that has.
And but you know that someone's put all their life savings in a bank account because they thought they would. Well, then that's greed, isn't it? They're going to get 50 million quid out of.
I know, I know. It's just that these, and I'm not going to use that word. But
no, mate, I hear it, mate, I said all along, in my defence, Charlie, I've said all along, I'm quite well insulated from this.
Yep.
I'm probably better. I mean, in many ways, with the success of my books, I'm going to come out of Brexit better off than I went into it. People know who I am now. So
I
that's
listen
perhaps
to you every day.
Yeah.
Every day. And I listen to LBC 13 hours a day. I'm having to drive lorries now.
Right.
So I listen to LBC 13 hours a day.
Blimey.
And I hear all the arguments from everybody.
Yes.
But that's not going to change the situation that I'm in now.
No, it's
and
not.
I'm just going to have to deal with it. I've made a big loss.
No, that's a really helpful call for me, and it's a great way of kicking off the next hour, where we'll look at the content for the comment, compassion for the con question, because I wonder whether I do have to acknowledge that it's easy for me to say, because my livelihood is in many ways enhanced by the madness of the last 4.5 years. I'd swap it in a heartbeat. I'd go back to being a little-known, obscure gob on a stick. I'd do it in a heartbeat. I'd even, rewind and remove the books from my CV if we could swap it for removing this madness from our islands. But I don't know. Let's have a look at that. And it's a little bit self-regarding, perhaps, but I am often the lens through which we examine bigger pictures. And I can't look Charlie in the eye and tell him to go easy on the fishermen, because the fishermen have the people that voted for Brexit, and the fishermen were very prominent among that movement, have messed his life up. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. It's 1101.
Leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It's 4 minutes after 11, and I don't know whether you're surprised to learn that I returned to the Brexit conversations quite reluctantly and with quite a heavy heart. I look back over the years we've spent together picking over the potential impacts of this astonishing decision, this immense decision that the country took in 2016. And I think we got some stuff wrong. Clearly, it's ridiculous to suggest that we could have made a bigger impact. You have to be very conscious of your own status, and it is in an industry where you generally have to have quite a high opinion of yourself to stay sane. No one's kidding themselves that a couple of radio presenters and who in the mainstream media, who would you point at and say, look, there's someone who's really strongly Remain? Yeah? Anyone? So you might be able to mention a couple of politicians, most obviously, oddly, the Conservative rebels as they became, your sort of Rory Stewarts, your Anna Soubry's, your Dominic Greaves. But who, if you started making a list of people who weren't in Parliament but were prominent on the Leave side, I mean, we'd be here all day, wouldn't we? Radio presenters, newspaper columnists, MEPs, I suppose. And then you make a list of people on the other side. Who's on it? So it was never really. It's a miracle. It was so close in the end, 52-48. But what I find most dispiriting now is the way that, because you can't frame it as a win. Even if your predictions come true, you still lose. This is why the rhetoric of "you lost, get over it" was so dangerous. Because, I love your liberal tears. And you'd sort of say, but I'm probably going to be okay. My tears are for the fishermen who still think that everything's going to go swimmingly. Do you see? My tears, if what I am hearing from, for example, people who really understand food import-exports, if what I'm hearing from them is even half true, then farmers are going to get a kicking. But farmers are being told by people like John Redwood and Jacob Rees-Mogg that the son, Boris Johnson, that the sunlit uplands are just around the corner. So that was the weirdest thing for me. It's a bit like a therapy session today. I hadn't realised I needed this. So the weirdest thing for me was being told, and the problem now, even now, it sounds a little bit smug, doesn't it? A little bit, good old St. James worrying about people and not worrying about himself. I'm flipping furious about the abolition of freedom of movement. I think it's the most ridiculous thing. However, I have my Irish passport. Gary Lineker and Bob Geldof, a couple of people pointing out. There you go. There are people on that list. I was thinking more about people with a major media platform, actually, though. And although Gary is on telly a lot, he doesn't, as far as I'm aware, he's not permitted to explain the realities of Brexit while he's chewing over today's big matches on Match of the Day. So it's the weirdest thing to be told that your discomfort is a prize. And I'm allowed to do this, I think. I've had it a lot over the last few years. Ha, you lost, get over it. I love your liberal tears. Oh, I can't believe that Brexit derangement syndrome, James O'Brien's going mad, all this stuff. And it's, so much water off a duck's back. But what I failed to properly explain to you, I think, was that I wasn't really worried about myself, I'm eligible for an Irish passport, so I, like many prominent Brexiters, will be able to assume dual citizenship. I wasn't worried about myself. I was worried, and I think you could loosely describe this as what is generally meant by leftish politics. I was worried, or Christian social democracy, let's call it. I was worried about people less fortunate than myself, because I felt that they were more likely, if what we were being told about Brexit by people who seemed to really understand it was half true, then it was going to be bad news for everybody, from your fishing fleet right through to your farmers, via your factory workers and anybody who works in food and drink. And that's why I'm so sad today. But the last fella, was it Charlie, has made me realise that I'm actually, for once, I possibly am a little bit guilty of being insulated and smug's not the right word, but contempt for the con men, compassion for the conned is all very well for me to say, given that my livelihood is not going to be measurably damaged by the consequences of Brexit. I may have to pay more for my food. I obviously won't be able to move. Well, I will when I get my new passport. But you see what I mean. So when I say contempt for the con men, compassion for the conned, what do you say to remind me why that's a little bit too pat, it's a little bit too glib? And I am also today utterly fascinated by the question of how we tell the difference between the problems we're seeing now that are a result of having a clown car in Downing Street and the problems that we're seeing now that are the actual consequence, and therefore much harder to fix, consequence of Brexit itself. Robin's in Newlyn. Robin, what would you like to say?
Good morning, first of all.
Hello, Robin. Good morning to you too.
Now, I've only been listening for about 10 minutes, so I'm not quite clear who said what and to whom and about what.
That's all right.
Basically, the fishing industry was sold a pup by professional politicians who are there to make, or voted in to make decisions for us, and obviously this one is a stinker.
Well, you say obviously. Can I inquire after your perspective, your qualifications on this?
Okay, 45 years in the fishing industry.
All right, champ. that's me told. How bad is it?
Well, let's just stop with the good, bad, and the indifference. Let's go to the facts.
Yes, go on.
Okay. So 5 years ago, everybody thought it was a great idea to have this referendum to leave. 5 years ago, I put into perspective for most people what it meant to trade. The paperwork increase, what it's like to be outside of a trading club, what it does to you as far as paperwork and border controls goes,
yes,
and the increased costs. Everybody dismissed that as a project to put them off voting for independence and sovereignty.
So Project Fear you're describing.
Well, whatever they care to call it. The project itself was actually to inform them that this was going to happen. And I've been doing this for about 5 years. And to be honest with you, nobody's been listening. So the consequence is now they are where they are. Snake oil salesmen, as you described them as earlier on,
yes,
and I agree with you entirely, have sold these. And these people are paid by the public purse to look into this properly and make the proper decisions to look after the people of their own country. These politicians are paid to do this job, and they're not, and have not done it. The consequences are we now have to have Intrastat, which is international VAT, We have to have customs agents. We have to have environmental health checks, which are good. We have to have certificates of origin. We have to have nomenclature, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically commodity codes for each individual species of fish and how it's treated and how it's been processed to go into the EU. For some of those, we don't even have a UK standard, which is part of our problem.
Yeah.
EU standards were great while we remember. Now we're out. We have to have our own standards. We don't have standards for quite a lot of these processes. Therefore, the border controls are not even letting us out of our own country, let alone into the EU. Sea quality is another issue. Sea qualities of A, B, and C were brought in by the EU, very rightly so, and cleaned up our beaches and gave us all good blue flags, etc., etc. Sea quality now is very important for the export of live shellfish.
You really know your stuff, Robin.
I could go on for hours.
No, I
anyway,
so.
However, not to bore your...
I could listen to you for hours, but there are other factors at play here.
The big factor is, no matter what you do, the bottom line is that no deal, whether it's Theresa May's deal, Boris Johnson's deal, anybody else's deal, does not make up for the fact that we are out of the customs union and single market. Those two particular things are the two biggest issues going forward for all of us in the United Kingdom. And it doesn't matter whether we're in the fishing industry, the car industry, food processing industry, farming, or whatever. Those things literally do affect us bang on the nose.
But this is why I keep reaching for the Emperor's New Clothes analogy, because you clearly have been shouting, he's naked, he's naked, he's naked for 5 years. But given that you work in the fishing industry, could you briefly, because we're going to be late for the break already, but I'd love to know how have you got a more sophisticated analysis of why so many people in that... Have you got a more sophisticated analysis of why so many people...
Where are you?
Can you not hear me?
You vanished, James. I lost you.
Well, there you go. Yeah, be careful what you wish for, trolls. Can we get Robin back up after the break? Can we make sure that's all right? Can everybody else still hear me? Can you hear me, Keith? Ava, can you... hello? Hello? Hello?
LBC. Leading Britain's conversation. LBC. With James O'Brien.
It's 19 minutes after 11, and I told you yesterday, I knew I shouldn't have done, I must have jinxed it. I told you yesterday that when I was broadcasting from the shed, there were a couple of occasions, it's one of the main reasons why I haven't gone back into the shed, that I started worrying that no one could hear me while I was talking, and that just came sort of true, but everyone else could hear me. It was just Robin in Newlyn who couldn't, but we've restored radio contact, and I was asking you, Robin, if... Given that you, for people just tuning in, 45 years in European trade specifically, or particularly with reference to fish, and shouting from the rooftops for 5 years that it would be impossible to improve upon the situation that we already had, how do you account for the fact that so many people specifically in the fishing sector were so convinced that you were wrong?
Well, first of all, there are 2 points.
Yeah.
Point one, not all the fishing industry voted to leave.
Very good point. I apologise. You're absolutely right.
You're probably looking at around about 60% did,
Yeah.
maybe 70% did, but there were a good proportion that didn't because they knew damn well it would affect their incomes.
Yes. Second point, in answer to the question of why did so many people fall for something that, from your perspective, it's not unlike my own experience recently, it was so blindingly clear to you what this meant. How do you account for the fact that so many people who do it for a living couldn't see what you could see?
Okay, acronyms.
Yes.
One, who in their right mind in any industry at all, apart from my own specific level here and also customs clearances, have heard of a C88 SAP form?
Yeah.
I've heard of the NCTS system. I've heard of the Chief EIT system. I've heard of certificates of origin. You know, who in the common public has heard of all these things?
But wouldn't fishermen know? Would the fishermen... Oh, okay. That's a good answer.
Even heard of them.
Okay.
Nobody has heard of all these things because basically I used to do this before we were in the single market. Therefore, I know exactly what they all are. Who knows what interest that is?
So your perspective is partly because, forgive me, Robin, because you're old enough to remember what it was like before we went in.
Yes, thank you for that. I need ironing, yes, you're correct.
Well, I hadn't thought of that because, of course, what I've taken over the last few years was an awful lot of people from your generation telling me that everything was absolutely fine before we joined and therefore everything will be absolutely fine after we leave. But
well, my first question would be to them is, what do you do for a living?
Yeah. So how now do you, and I won't detain you for much longer, but there's a lot of love for you coming in on the programme, although a few people are saying, why weren't you ringing me sooner? What? I'm sure you've got work to do, or not now.
Well, that's probably that's the issue. I'm still working.
Yes,
I may be old, but I'm still working.
Well, good for
I'm
you.
actually busier now than I ever was.
Good, because you've got to help people deal with the new realities
of
trade.
That's what I'm doing. Funny enough, it's an unpaid occupation I do at the moment, but I am helping people out of this horrible situation.
So, well, thank you for that, and thank you for helping us. But here's the killer question today, and you may not be able to answer it. How do we tell the difference, with your help, between you might call fixable problems that have been caused by the appalling preparation or absence of preparation undertaken by the Vote Leave government and the consequences of the sort of snake oil elements of selling the deal on Christmas Eve? How do we tell the difference between the fixable problems caused by governmental incompetence and the rather bigger, less temporary problems caused by the unavoidable impact of Brexit?
Right, well, first, to fix this, there is only one fix, and that's to rejoin the customs union and the single market. It is that simple. It is not complicated. That is the bottom line. Yeah. Your second question is, what do we do about the rest of the short-term issues that this has thrown up, is to work as hard as we bloody well can to fill in the necessary paperwork and make sure that everybody is understanding what EU VAT forms are, what NCTS systems are, what C88 forms are, what T1s forms are, etc., 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 until we can actually get the thing moving. The biggest problem we have at the moment is that UK customs are just not up to speed.
No.
The whole hold-ups that have happened so far due to this are that the systems are confused. They are individual systems. There are two of them. There's the Chief and the NCTS. One gives you a barcode to enter the port. The other one gives you the clearance form.
Yeah.
And neither, at the moment, seem to be marrying up because we have inexperienced customs staff who have literally had 6 months on the job and have never seen this before, don't know what it is, and basically with all the rest of the paperwork that comes with it, cannot pass it.
But this is
they're doing a job.
Yes, and they're doing the best they can in very difficult circumstances, and they've been led. I mean, the problem is the entire project was built on abolishing red tape, and the people who promised that we were going to abolish red tape are in charge of ensuring that we all understand what all the new red tape is going to involve. That's incredible, isn't it?
Well, the lawmakers are incompetent.
Yeah, well, clearly.
That's the bottom line. Everybody within the fishing industry on the peripheries of it, i.e. environmental health officers, port health, customs officials, customs clearance, have been so helpful. It's been unbelievable. They all bend over backwards to try and help you. The problem is the systems that are in place cannot help you. So that's where our problem is.
No, and thank God for people like you in that case. But there's two ultimate ironies here, I think. That first one there is that part of the reason why, and we're going to have to call it red tape, part of the reason why we are negotiating the red tape so badly is because the lawmakers are there, because they told us that we were going to be abolishing red tape. I mean, that's an astonishing kind of symmetry, isn't it? And the second thing is that the people best placed to help get us out of this mess are, and you are the embodiment of this phenomenon, if you'd allow me to say that, the people who are going to have to help us get out of the bits that we can get out of are the people who've been shouting the loudest about the idiocy of getting into it in the first place.
Ironically, yes, but like I say, the problems are that the lawmakers, the government ministers, and the people who should have been looking into this and informing the population of the UK how damaging this would be, or even how good it would be. I haven't seen yet a good comment come out of it yet, but however, if they could have informed accurately what this would entail, I am absolutely sure that nobody would have voted for it. It is total lunacy encompassed by basically a government that's incompetent.
I'd go further, I think, because the incompetence is it's more complicated than mere incompetence. It's almost as if they, I mean, this idea that the reason why they're handling it so badly is because they lied about it or they simply didn't understand in the first place. So they're selling you something that doesn't exist, and then until
no,
they
you're
had...
absolutely right there. No, you're absolutely right in your first comment there.
Yeah.
They lied,
Wow.
and you're absolutely bang on the net, and underline that. They all lied, and I cannot find one yet that has told the truth. And that's not to do with anything about party politics or anything. I just want somebody to tell me that they have done the research and could actually answer some of my questions, or one of my questions, or any of my questions, or give me any alternatives to looking at this as being literally a wall built between us and the EU.
Well, it is. And of course, your frustration is also born of the fact that fixing it properly is impossible until the scale of the error is acknowledged.
Till the understanding of the error.
Yeah.
Because basically this is the biggest problem. The lawmakers have never understood what it entails to get across the border. They don't care. They are there literally swinging political balls around in the air for a better... and that's what they're doing. And none of them landed in the right place. They've been kicked all over the shop.
Yeah.
Nobody knows who's playing from one touchline to the next. They have no idea.
As you said, to touch with Jonathan Van Tams there. I'm going to ask you one final question. I'm going to read you... I don't know if you might want to sit down for this. I'm going to read you something that John Redwood has tweeted
wonderful. Go on.
3 hours ago, and I'd invite your polite response, if I may.
Yeah.
Robin.
Yeah.
John Redwood tweets, "Time for the government to sort out the fishing issues. The industry expects a better deal. There's plenty the government can do to improve things."
Well, the first thing they can do to improve things is make sure that John's lobotomy recovers from it properly.
That's a little unkind, although clearly in jest.
It's not. No, absolutely no. When a man makes a foolish statement like that, in the face of the problems that we have, he needs to be literally removed from society. He's a nuisance.
Removed from the public space. So there's not a scintilla. I mean, clearly, if he's listening, he's welcome to ring in and provide us with the detail
Absolutely.
on what it is.
Please do, Mr. Redwood. Call in now. I would love to talk to you.
The gauntlet has been thrown out. Robin, will you keep in touch? And thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for your insights. It's just so frustrating, isn't it, to hear people who... maybe it was a sort of collective madness that descended on us. I know with Trump it's so frustrating to feel so many of those roads leading back to a form of jingoism or exceptionalism or even racism. But the question of why would somebody like Robin not be believed, I think can only be answered via reference to the portrayal of the European Union as somehow being our enemy. If I tell you there's an enemy over there and I'm going to save you from it, it doesn't make you stupid to line up behind me. But when it's become almost impossible to ignore the fact that the enemy not only never existed, but were actually our friends all along, then perhaps that S word does. Robin clearly a lot less diplomatic than me. He'd be quite happy to reach for ruder words than I routinely deploy these days on the radio. Back in the day, I would probably have been a bit fruitier. But at what point does it become unforgivable to cling to the carcass of this project? And I guess that's where the contempt for the conman, compassion for the conned model that I've been rather proud of over the last 2.5 years begins to look a little flimsy. 0345 6060 973. And I have to remind you, having just enjoyed the benefits of Robin's wisdom, that Michael Gove said that the country had had enough of experts. How's that working out for you? Dominic Ellis is here now with the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
It is 11:34 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Your show is a mind-numbing echo chamber. I keep hoping that you might actually offer a debate. Robin from Cornwall didn't actually say anything apart from listing forms to be filled out. A lot of that is to do with sustainable fishing. Why don't they just get on with it? Methinks you're upset, James, that the lorries aren't backing up across Kent. Listen, for the billionth time, okay? Watching bad things happen does not bring people pleasure, okay? The reason why the lorries aren't backing up across Kent is because the lorries aren't coming here now. Deliveries are down 50%, I think, from some European countries, and they are refusing. One of the biggest companies in Germany has temporarily halted driving to Britain because of all the red tape and the paperwork. So if you derive pleasure from other people's unhappiness, and forgive me, but a lot of Brexiters did I'm not saying you necessarily did, but a lot of messages. Oh, I love how upset you are. It's great. It upsets people like you. Yay. Remainer tears. So just because you're made that way, it doesn't mean that I am. Okay? I do not want to see bad things happen. I would love to be wrong about everything. But you are texting a radio show to tell a man who's spent 45 years as a consultant for fish sales across the United Kingdom and Europe. He also works in fish processing and product development, and helps businesses put their menus together. You can tell I've just found him on Twitter, can't you? And you're telling him that you know more about the fish industry. And that's not being done to you by Robin in Newlyn, or by, James O. Bobbering or James O. Brexit on the radio, or whatever you want to call me. You have been turned into someone who hears a 4.5 decade long expert describing his own field of expertise, and you've been turned into someone who thinks that he knows better. Now, it's not beyond all realms of possibility that you do know better than him, but if your best line of refutation is methinks you're upset, James, that the lorries aren't backing up across Kent, then it's never too late to stop and think, hang on a minute, are we the baddies? And also, because otherwise, next time you get in touch, I'll probably be a little bit petty about it. You've got to spell your correctly if you're going to send in these messages, because it just undermines some of the potential impact that they might have. But you've been turned into someone who can hear 45 years of expertise and think, oh, I know better because I trust Nigel. And it's never too late to break free. 11:37 is the time. There are other stories around, most obviously, of course, the coronavirus. I forgot my daily dose of optimism and good news. It is still the case that our vaccination programme is the envy of much of the world. Those numbers are still rising, so that's the daily good news. Bad news in particular, perhaps, as we see Brazil overtake the UK as the country with the most new cases yesterday. It is to Brazil that attention has turned, and Rachel Venables is here to tell us why.
Well, James, it's that word I think we've all started to dread hearing about in the news, variant. We know that there have been a number of new coronavirus variants popping up, and I should stress, of course, we know that that is not uncommon. Viruses mutate all the time, but what we're seeing with COVID-19, first in the Kent variant, then the South African, and now the Brazilian variants, is that these do seem to be adapting and becoming more and more transmissible, and it is really worrying some scientists who are also trying to make sure that the new mutations of this awful virus aren't making it easier to avoid the vaccine and our immune responses to it. And we have just had confirmation in the last hour or so from a group of scientists who've been pulled together to study the effects and threats from these new mutations, of course, coming around the world, that one Brazilian variant of coronavirus has actually already been detected here in the UK. And of course, an effort to stop this from happening is why this morning a travel ban came in for all travellers from South America. Unfortunately, it seems as though that variant has already arrived here in the UK. The news came from leading virologist Professor Wendy Barclay. She heads up the G2P UK National Virology Consortium, and she's confirmed that there are actually two different types of Brazilian variants. One of them, she says, has been detected, one of them has not. We have no more details about that, about the distinction between the two. She also added that it was probably introduced some time ago and that it will be being traced very carefully. This is, I should say, a change from what the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, was saying only this morning, telling media that he wasn't aware of any cases of the Brazilian strain having already arrived here in the UK. The government only found out about its existence a few days ago. And of course, they did face some criticism through the week about what some perceived to be a slowness to act before introducing that travel ban, which has started this morning. And as I mentioned already, the fear, of course, that this Brazilian strain could be more transmissible even than the Kent mutation. And scientists will also be studying it very carefully to see what impact, if any, these changes might have had on the way that it responds to the vaccine.
Crikey, you covered all the ground there, Rachel Venables. Many thanks indeed. We will keep an eye on that story, this particularly unpleasant strain that has made its way here. See, look at the countries that have dealt with it worse, and they seem to be the countries where these new strains are most likely to pop up. It could be a coincidence, but it's the UK and Brazil. I'm surprised, actually, that America hasn't contributed to this problem. That would be, I know, you can't derive an ought from an is or an is from an ought, but the causation is not correlation and all that malarkey. But it is interesting that the UK and Brazil are second and third only to America at the moment in the context of the most new cases, and we're currently fifth on the most deaths. But the governmental incompetence of Brazil and the United Kingdom has been huge, and they are countries where new strains have popped up. It's probably a coincidence, I don't know, or it's possibly a coincidence. I don't have the qualifications or the expertise to comment, and that of course leads us neatly back to the Brexit conversation that we're having. And is there anybody left with expertise and qualifications that doesn't think that fishing in particular, that's where we're looking first, has been left considerably worse off than it was before? The most obvious iteration of that, and this is the bit where I think, the text that we read out a moment ago, this is where you really have to try to at least get over it and move on and recognise the reality as opposed to what you were hoping or what you were told was going to happen, because this isn't Bob Geldof talking about the fishing industry, or Gina Miller, or Gary Lineker, or J.K. Rowling, or James O'Boring. This is the National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations. So, I don't know about you, but you think back to that fella Farage actually being on the committee in the European Parliament for fisheries and never going. And it's almost as if he knew that the more he learned about the realities of the fishing industry, the harder it would be to stand up in public and make the claims that he was making. So, in a sense, ignorance is bliss. Why would I want to know about this? I don't care about fishermen. I only care about me. And I'm getting famous, he thinks to himself, by banging on about fish. The last thing I need is to listen to someone who actually knows what they're talking about. And that's the problem, because now it's the National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations. So one of the things Robin reminded us of was the fact that it's wrong to suggest that 100% of people in the fishing industry all voted to leave the European Union, but why so many of them couldn't see what was obvious to others is a question for the ages. 11:43 is the time. Steve is in Sidcup. Steve, what would you like to say?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome,
I just think that these guys need a bit more time, and the fisheries and the people that do the fisheries and all the people that got their boats anchored up and all that.
Yeah.
I think it's all going to come to them. I think it's 2 weeks since we actually left the EU.
Yes.
Just think there's just more time. If there's more time on the table, how would we be 3-4 months down the line? And how
there was, of course, an opportunity to have an implementation period, but we rejected it. The Vote Leave government rejected it.
And why would they have rejected something as sort of serious for the fisheries then? Why would that have been the case?
Well, because the government was elected on a promise to, quotes, get Brexit done, end quotes.
But surely that would have been... Something's got to be on the table for the fisheries. If the EU have only got 20% of our waters now, and we have 80%, the quota of fish that's required needs to be fished, isn't it? It needs to be taken out of the water and fished and sold on. So surely there's got to be something in the path there that's going to create that.
Like what?
Well, like an agreement, a trade agreement.
Yeah, but we've just signed one. That's what he was trumpeting about on Christmas Eve. Signed, yeah, but only surely it's got to be sign the agreement for the EU, yeah, to leave the EU with a sort of a small amount of dealings to get us over the fence, so to speak, yeah. But then after that, there'd be negotiations to sell what fish are going to be fished. Surely they're not going to stay in the water, are they? They're going to be fished at some point. Well, it's
and
not.
I just think that the fisheries.
Yeah, but I mean that means we don't have the capacity to fish the waters that we've now reclaimed. We don't have the boats and the bodies, and if we land it in the UK, will find it very, very hard to sell it into our biggest market, which remains the European Union. You've got Scottish trawlers now, Steve, landing in Denmark in order to avoid all the red tape that Brexiters were told they should vote to leave the European Union to get rid of. We've got red tape coming out of our ears, mate, and they've got none.
Yeah. No, I do get that part of it. I do get.
Do you know what the best proof is? Did you vote for it, Steve? No, just you don't have to answer that question.
Yeah, I think I do have to answer that question.
All
really,
right.
yes.
Okay.
And I did. Yes,
All
I did vote. I did vote to leave, but I voted to leave because I believed that we walked into the EU. We walked into a situation where I think we were governed, and certain aspects of our country were taken away from us. And I just think.
You see, I disagree with you. I disagree with you on that, but that's not the conversation that we're having today.
No,
we're talking about the fish, and to answer your question or to answer your points, if there was, as you describe it, a sort of, and it's not our world, this, so I don't think either of us can be expected to be bang on the technology and the terminology. But if there was a sort of magic solution. There's a brand new series, Trafficked, with Mariana Van Zeller, and it airs every Monday on the National Geographic Channel. It's an investigative look with unparalleled access to the underground and illicit world of smugglers. Mariana gains a unique level of backstage access, and the danger she puts herself in with each topical episode is incredible. In episode 2, Cocaine, Mariana retraces one of the world's most intractable smuggling routes, following the path of cocaine consignments from a remote Peruvian valley right through Colombia's Caribbean coast and all the way to the streets of Miami. Despite the decades-long US war on drugs, cocaine production is currently at an all-time high. Brand new series Trafficked with Mariana Van Zeller starts on Monday the 18th of January at 9 p.m. on the National Geographic Channel. Brand new series Trafficked with Mariana Van Zeller airs every Monday at 9 p.m. on the National Geographic Channel. Doesn't have to be magic to what we've been learning about today. Then Jacob Rees-Mogg could have told us what it was yesterday, and instead, Steve, he said this.
The government is tackling this issue, is dealing with it as quickly as possible, and the key is we've got our fish back. They're now British fish, and they're better and happier fish for it.
So your point is that, you know...
James,
can
I interrupt you?
Of course you can.
I totally agree that what the comment he came out with yesterday is well... I'll believe that every fisherman in this country that would have listened to that message yesterday would have been sort of like turning in their beds.
Yeah.
And just what did I hear there? You know what I mean? But
and yet, leaving in the fridge the conversation about what it was we lost and what we... You know, some of us have been pointing out what Rees-Mogg is made of for years now, and it's only yesterday that the penny dropped for you.
There has been certain things I've heard since we left or prior to leaving that obviously, you know, I've sat there and thought, did I make the right decision? But I just think 2 weeks on,
yeah.
I just think...
No, I agree with you. Well, I don't agree with you because I think Robin made it clear that some of these problems are permanent, but and the only way... There is no... Right, hand on heart, Steve, last question. Can you conceive... Things will get better. Of course they will, as people learn to deal with all the red tape they were promised that they were reducing, and it turns out they were increasing. They'll fill it all in and all of that. Can you conceive of any circumstances in which our situation will improve? It will be better than it was?
That's a big question. I think
really.
At the moment, and very quickly, it's a very big question.
Yeah, it is.
I think at the moment it's going to be more and more difficult because of the pandemic situation that's going on around the world. That's going to hold everything back, and then you're going to be months down the road because the pandemic's taken over. So I just think that prolonging that question and prolonging the answer to that question would need to be asked at the end of the
at the end of a longer period. All right. I hope you're right. Well, rather, you are right. Of course, you can't make a definitive conclusion now. But I would just alert you to the fact that the Financial Times reports today that they're planning to reduce workers' rights and get rid of things like the Working Time Directive, which, of course, they swore blind they weren't going to do. But hey ho, it's 11:48. Thank you, Steve.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC with James O'Brien.
It's 11:53 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Fish, bizarrely, back on the menu, but perhaps inevitably, with the National Federation of Fishing Organisations furious about what's been done to their business. Dave's been in touch. I'm going to read out some of these dates. Do try to be polite. You increase your chances of being read out if you can spell your correctly, and if you resist the urge to get ad hominem and personal. Why is JOB trying to quote from the NFFO as if it's an impartial entity? It's a pro-Remain, pro-EU organisation that's about as impartial on Brexit as JOB himself. Why are we buying back our fish from EU fishing boats instead of ours? Why is JOB not supporting our fishing industry? And Google is your friend. 27th of November 2016. Barry Dees, the chief executive of the NFFO. We see the UK's departure from the EU and therefore the common fishery policy as an opportunity to address the distortions that were built into the common fisheries policy from its inception. The UK industry is united that this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to put things right. That's your pro-EU, pro-Remain organisation, Dave, and here you are. I take it in good faith. I presume that you thought it was true when you sent it. You're not trying to sort of throw sort of little conkers at my programme, but you can find out whether these things that someone's told you are true in a nanosecond. It is at your fingertips. That's your... Oh, Dave. 11:54 is the time. How do you do the contempt for the con and compassion for the con, then? Given that I probably overlooked the fact that it's easy for me to say. I don't see that there's anything to be gained from relitigating Brexit. I really don't. But I guess that expecting people to admit the mistake. A lot of love coming in for Steve in Sig Cup, actually. A lot of people saying thank you for his candour and his integrity. And that's rapprochement. Those bonds can be rebuilt. But if you are John Redwood insisting that this can all be fixed without offering up any indication as to how, then I don't know how you do move forward together. Well, all right, here's the thing. How do you fix a problem together if the other fella still insists it's not a problem but a whopping great sunlit upland or a unicorn? That's an issue, right? I'm all for, let's all get our shoulders to the wheel and try and undo some of the mess that we've made. But how can you do that if you've got people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and John Redwood claiming that there's no mess at all? No mess here. No mess, just happy British fish. And the more I think about this little comment, the more I actually am tempted to put it up there with the claim that people died in Grenfell Tower because they lacked common sense. And if this bloke was dressed in Stone Island and sounded like the Lost Mitchell brother, there is no earthly way that he would have achieved any status in public life in this country whatsoever. You want to hear about deference? You want to look up forelock tugging and giving respect to people who don't deserve it? Well, you'll see this fella's picture in the dictionary.
The government is tackling this issue, is dealing with it as quickly as possible, and the key is we've got our fish back. They're now British fish, and they're better and happier fish for it.
And that's partly why he was so desperate, of course, not to have MPs working from home, because even something as idiotic, crass and offensive as that would be guaranteed to get a whee from all of the Muppets behind him. 11:56 is the time. Jack's in Padstow. Jack is a restaurateur with a particular interest in fish. What's going on, Jack?
Hey, James. Well, a bit of a strange situation for me. Obviously, now you've just prefaced that Jacob Rees-Mogg's comment with his atrocious comments about Grenfell. I'm a bit reluctant to say what I was going to say, but I am an ardent Remainer who almost has to say, well, as much as I hate to agree with Jacob Rees-Mogg, as a restaurateur who specialises in fish, then more British fish being kept in Britain is better for my business because, we struggle to get shellfish sometimes because a lot of it's exported.
Well,
I'll caveat it with saying, like you, I'd happily trade all of that to be still in the EU, 100%. Any extra profitability we'll make next year from all the lobsters and all the people staycationing, I would happily give away. But we are where we are with this situation. And
we'll take our silver linings where we find them. How much do we know about this, though? Because the UK fishing boats will get a greater share of the fish from UK waters. That will be phased in between now and 2026. And then we'll start negotiating again on how the catch is shared out between the UK and the EU. But at the moment, EU boats are still fishing UK waters.
Yeah. And a lot of our boats are landing to Europe, and they always have, actually.
Right.
A lot of the trawlers will land straight into France. And I think, again, it's, I suppose, a bit like Jacob's companies that maybe don't exist within the EU that moved. A lot of the fishermen that have the trawlers can now land straight to the EU like they always have and avoid the red tape. And I think, really, for me as a restaurateur, because our fishermen work so hard, and I think part of the reason from Robin's fantastic call earlier on, what a legend he is.
Do you know him?
In Newlyn, yeah, I know of him.
Yeah.
I've never met him, but he's obviously a big character down in the port there.
Yes.
But one of the things that I think is fishermen work so hard, and they really, I mean, it's such a hard industry, and actually it's become such a national sense of pride because we're an island nation.
Yes.
And actually to con them into voting for Brexit, like the way that everyone else has, is, I guess, easier because they do, they feel part of a kind of island nation state that they are, and it's understandable.
There's an emotional appeal there, and we had a caller earlier who'd bless him, who'd fallen for this sort of this phrase, sovereign coastal something, and it's not going to fill the gaps on the supermarket shelves, or indeed deal with the increase in price. So I'm just struggling to knit your silver lining together. I think I'm there.
Well,
so there's a Welsh shellfish wholesaler I saw on the news a couple of days ago, 50 grand's worth of lobster, prawn and crab been delayed for more than 30 hours on its way to Spain. You don't need me to tell you that this is the worst imaginable cargo that you could have being delayed for 30 hours. You know what rotting seafood smells like more than anybody else does. But your silver lining would involve her selling it to you instead, in a sense.
If we were open to business, we would definitely take it. And I think that as the British population should now look, because of Brexit, like silver linings have to be where we can find them. I guess if the British consumer looks at British fish and says there's potential to explore more species, then that would be good for our fishermen and for us as a restaurant company. But again,
not better than it was before, but not as bad as it could otherwise be.
I'd rather have a burgundy passport any day of the week.
There we go. Do you want to hear the most middle class thing ever?
Go on.
So I started geocaching with one of my daughters, and we went out near your place in Barnes the other day, and we found a cache. And I put a reply on the, it was on the towpath, I put a reply on the website and I said, oh, God, this is such a lovely little part of London. I'd not discovered it before, that side of the towpath. I'm definitely going to come back when the pub's open. And I got a reply saying, oh, you must try Rick Stein's. It's absolutely gorgeous.
There we go. You've already been, so.
I know I have. I thought you'd want to know. It's 1 minute after 12.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC. This is LBC from Global. Leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Four minutes after 12 is the time. I just read you this from David Baddiel because it reflects my thoughts completely. I approve of Trump's Twitter ban. At the same time, I do find myself wanting to go and check his feed for the next barn pot tweet. I'm like a junkie who completely realises that stuff is bad but still craves a fix. Yes, we're sort of nostalgic for duller times, I think is a fair way of putting it. Now, there are other stories around. One that is particularly arresting is news on the front page of the Times that more than 150,000 arrest records were wiped in a tech blunder. More than 150,000 fingerprint, DNA and arrest history records have been wiped off police databases in a technology blunder. I presume the buck stops for this at the Home Office, doesn't it? The PNC, the Police National Computer, is actually owned and operated by the Home Office. The error last week was attributed to a software bug. I have in the past, with stories like this, invited IT experts to ring in and educate the rest of us. I may do that again. I mean, how forgivable is this? How avoidable is this? It means that crucial intelligence about suspects has vanished. Britain's visa system has been thrown into disarray. The processing of applications has been suspended for 2 days, so, that's not the end of the world. But the Times reports that the error may allow offenders to go free because biometric evidence left at crime scenes will now not be flagged up on the Police National Computer. I don't know if you watched Armando Iannucci's television series, The Thick of It, But if you did, you could be forgiven for thinking that reality is now imitating art.
There has been a massive, irretrievable data loss. The last 7 months' worth of new immigrant details have gone, apparently lost in the computer.
Do the Guardian know about this?
I don't... Guardian, I don't know. What do you think, Malcolm? On the department, will that work?
Yes, let's cause a little bit of friction. Let's fire someone. What about Glenn?
No, you can't just fire Glenn
Well,
like that.
we could fire Glenn.
Shall I get his file?
So, Malcolm, how do we play it at the Guardian?
Smile. Smile, smile, smile.
So more than 150,000 fingerprint DNA and arrest history records have been wiped off police databases in an irretrievable and permanent technological breach, Priti Patel. And you can imagine her saying, have the Times got hold of it? Yes, it's on today's front page. How are you going to wriggle out of this one? I think it might be time to summon the Usherwood, don't you? Get a little bit more detail on this story. One would imagine, Priti Patel being Priti Patel, that there will be comments about or stories regarding desperate refugees in tiny flimsy dinghies running the risk of dying in the English Channel. She'll be suggesting that you hate on them as a way of distracting from this, or possibly even the death penalty story will make a return to public spaces. I don't know, but the answer I mean, again, you know, what do you have to do to lose your job in this government? Anyway, we shall get our political editor to explain further details to us about this. Summon the Usherwood. A lot of love still coming in for Robin, I have to tell you, which is great. It's good to hear a voice of sanity, experience and knowledge in reference to the impact of Brexit on the UK fishing industry. If a call ever cut through the flag-waving inaccuracies and lies of Redwood and Farage, it was this one. I agree with you, actually. It was one of the most enjoyable calls we've taken in a very, very long time. But I do feel that the fury of the National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations is even more pertinent today. And it's given me pause on something that I thought I had filed under permanent. I don't know whether actually I should still continue with the old contempt for the conman, compassion for the cond. I think I will, but I will do it constantly with the caveat that it is easy for me to say. Although, actually, no, it's not that easy for me to say because, you know, I'm now saying that we should have compassion for the kind of people who have been absolutely vile to and about me for the best part of half a decade. And that, you know, that's Christianity. You might not like that description of it, but that's how I was raised. You know, do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. If you want to bring it up to date a bit with a Michelle Obama riff, it would be when they go low, we go high. So I am sticking to it, but I'm now going to take calls on the question of why you're not. Okay? Why can you not yet have compassion for the con? So when you hear people, perhaps you make a distinction between people who have realised it was wrong. It's too late now, by the way, for generations. It's not, nothing's going to happen, but you can't stop telling the truth just because you don't like it. So the question of why you're not going to have compassion for the conned. And how do you tell the difference between a con victim and a con artist? And it's obvious that people like Farage and Redwood and Hannan have said things that have turned out to be completely wrong, and they still insist that they're right. So that is a fairly clear distinction. But for non-public figures, for ordinary people, family members even, how do you tell the difference between someone that swallowed it and someone that sold it? Because it's going to... maybe it's not actually going to be that important in the long run, but it feels important to me at the moment. And there is a little bit of sanctimony involved, I think, in saying, well, you might have been absolutely horrible to me, but I'm not going to be horrible to you. But there has to come a point where you no longer deserve the benefit of the doubt, or you no longer deserve compassion. Where is that point? 0345 6060 973. So you go back to June 2016. You watch all the claims fall away, from the 350 million quid for the NHS right through to the fish. So we'll make things better for our fishing fleet. Every single one now has withered on the vine, and you're left claiming that you prefer sovereignty to money or food or whatever it may be. And I ask you what sovereignty means, and you generally don't know. And there's no shame in that either, because people like Farage and Redwood and Rees-Mogg wouldn't be able to tell you what they mean by sovereignty either. But why are you not joining me on my crusade to preach compassion for the conned and contempt for the con men? 03456060973. Ulf is one of our German correspondents. He's in Hamburg. Ulf, what would you like to say?
Well, thanks for the honor of calling me a correspondent. I would like to say that compassion is counterproductive no matter how you approach the matter. There are basically, I believe, two ways you can take this. Either you say, okay, let's make the best of it, make Brexit, if not a success, at least something that works. But you cannot cooperate with Brexiters if deep down in your mind you pity them, because pity is a kind of contempt. They'll notice and they won't like it, and actually they'll be right. Or
yes,
you view it
I don't agree that pity is necessarily a form of contempt, but I think that the recipients of pity can often see it that way.
Yeah, it will be very, very difficult and touchy. And if you view Brexit as a battle lost in a larger cultural war, as I do, well, if you're in a fight, in a knife fight, you do respect your enemy and the knife he wields.
Yes.
But you are not well-meaning, because you must be willing to draw blood and spill guts yourself. So either way, you lose. So actually, you must decide what you want to achieve and what course of action will...
Well, then we're going to have to suck it up then, because the other side won't. So we're just going to have to drop the insistence that you admit that you've made a terrible mistake, and then we'll all get on with fixing the terrible mistake that you've made as best as we can. Because that, for me, is a psychological obstacle for me personally. But that's probably to do with what I've been doing professionally for the last 5 years. I feel we can't both put our shoulders to the wheel, the former Remainer and the Leaver, to undo the damage. They've got to admit they caused the damage before we can start undoing it together.
Frankly, who cares?
Yeah.
What is your objective?
Yeah.
Do you want to make the best of it, or is your objective, say, to reverse Brexit? If the latter is your objective, Brexit must fail, and it must fail fast and hard.
But then you have to find yourself wanting it to fail, which is counterintuitive, because I flipping live here.
It's short-term pain compared to long-term gain.
Yeah, but then, no, but all that stuff about, I mean, yeah, oh man, I didn't need this. So if we were to use the P word, Ulf, if we were to bring patriotism into things, you could argue that the long-term welfare of your country is improved by short-term suffering.
Yeah, sure. In this case, I mean, it doesn't have to be patriotism. I don't get patriotism. I'm interested in the people who live in a certain place.
Of
they
course.
will suffer
Same here.
more. Brexit,
Yeah, all right. Just scratch that. When I say patriotism, I'm thinking about people, not soil.
Yeah. So am I. Actually, I don't think about patriotism or flag waving. The whole concept strikes me as silly.
No, of course. But yeah. Well, then you need to either. Oh, it's going to be awful, isn't it?
Yeah. There is no good choice. And let's put it this way: if you're in a fight, you will get hurt.
Yes.
If you can't run, if you can't de-escalate, if you are in a fight, you will be injured. You just must make sure that the other side is injured more.
Yeah, yeah. So, but then, oh lordy.
I admit it's a martial artist logic, but that's what I am.
Well, so am I actually. Ulf, I'm a martial artist, but my weapons are words.
Yeah, you got a third-degree black belt at the very least.
Yeah, bless you, thank you. Crikey, there was a sort of an irresistible logic to that explanation. I'm not ready yet to do that. I need to, I guess. I mean, how's it going to play out? What happens next? I mean, if you'd said to me, within 2 weeks of us finally leaving the European Union, the first people to be complaining will be the fishermen, even I would have gone, oh, come off it. They'll be the only ones that are happy. And here we are. How do you move forward? 12:15 is the time.
This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation. LBC with James O'Brien.
19 minutes after 12 is the time, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the conversation continues. The well, here's a helpful bit from Jack. James, please help people to see that compassion is needed for people like me. We were stuck in a whirlwind of lies and propaganda, and without people like you on the radio explaining it clearly with compassion towards us, I think we would be in an even more terrible situation. Listening to you has made me look at my choice and realise it was the wrong choice. If we don't respect others and help people to change, then we have nothing. I guess you're right. I know you're right, Jack, but I think for a lot of people listening today, and I'm Incorrigible points out that if you're in prison, you don't get to apply for probation until you've admitted your guilt, and you have. So there's a clear distinction needed between, he's going to have compassion for people who agree with him, but he's not going to have any compassion for people who don't. But again, you're falling into the trap of thinking that two opinions are somehow equal and opposite. The fishermen are furious. I thought they were going to be the only ones who came out of this happy. I got that wrong, actually. Maybe it will get fixed. Is it going to be better than what it was like before? Not in a million years. No one thinks so. Crazy times. Theo Usherwood, let's just play that clip again, shall we? Just to bring Theo up to speed. Theo, this is now happening in real life. Stay there a second.
There has been a massive, irretrievable data loss. The last 7 months' worth of new immigrant details have gone, apparently lost in the computer.
Did the Guardian know about this?
I don't... Guardian, I don't know. What do you think, Malcolm?
21 minutes after 12. It's not 7 months' worth of immigrant data. It's 150,000 arrest records wiped in a tech blunder. Theo, what can you tell us?
They have indeed been wiped in a tech blunder. So they include DNA and fingerprints of individuals who have been arrested but then later released without charge. Now, as the law currently stands, James, the police can hold your DNA or fingerprints for 3 years, but it then must be deleted from your records. In order to comply with that law, every week we see the Home Office deletes records from the National Police computer. But last week, an additional 150,000 records, which the police had every right to hold and were actually meant to be kept, were deleted in this blunder. The Home Office, as I said, insisting that these do not include the records of convicted offenders who might be wanted in connection with other crimes. Instead, they're the records of people who've been arrested, as I said, and then released. But of course, the charge from Labour, James, is that this is another error on behalf of the Home Office. Nick Thomas-Symonds, he's the Shadow Home Secretary, he says in a quote, "It's not good enough for the Home Secretary to hide behind her junior minister on this when there's been such a major security breach on her watch. It's now vital she makes an urgent statement outlining the scale of the issue when ministers were informed and what the plan is to provide reassurance." Yet again, Conservative incompetence is putting people's safety at risk. And of course, that junior minister that Nick Thomas-Symonds refers to is the policing minister, Kit Malthouse, who released a statement this morning saying that earlier this week a standard housekeeping process that runs on the Police National Computer deleted a number of records in error. A fast time review, I suppose that's in reverse to as opposed to a slow time review, has identified the problem, was corrected, and the process corrected the process so it cannot happen again. The Home Office and other law enforcement partners are working at pace to recover the data. While the loss relates to individuals who are arrested and then released with no further action, I have asked officials and the police to confirm their initial assessment that there is no threat to public safety. I'll provide further updates as we conclude our work. And that's the statement, as I said, from the policing minister, Kit Malthouse.
Do we know how it happened? Or do we just file it under what they've said, software bug or glitch or something like that?
So as I said, it was a blunder, and there is, and what Kit Malthouse is referring to as the standard housekeeping process is that deletion of records which the government has to do in order to comply with the law. Because of course the government, if you are arrested and then we're released without charge, the government just can't hold on to your DNA.
Driving at, and it may well be that neither of us know. Is it going to be a human error, or is it going to be something that gets blamed on computer programs?
We don't yet know. I don't know the answer to that question.
No, nor do I. I just think it's interesting.
But I think rather than it necessarily being a tech a bug or something that has led to the deletion of these records, what it appears to be is that when the records that are meant to be deleted were deleted, because of course the government cannot hold on to those records. They
accidentally deleted some that they weren't supposed to delete.
A whole load more.
It's a bit like accidentally hoovering up the cat.
Yes.
When you're intending
meant
to hoover up the carpet.
The spill on the carpet.
The detritus, and you accidentally catch a gerbil. Thank you, Theo Ashwood. 24 minutes after 12 is the time. I was going to do this. I kind of got a little bit distracted. Zishan's been in touch. So he got the good news today that all the consignments we've shipped out to Europe, we are power and hand tool distributors, are now being returned due to the fees that the recipients will incur. It seems they'd rather buy within the EU where it will work out cheaper for them. And these are problems we need to keep an eye on, although Chris is very keen. He's just to say, when will you stop it? When will you stop moaning about... I've lost the tweet. Never mind. There's a few of them today. I'm sure I'll find another contender. My God, he writes, will you Remainers never stop moaning, you sarcastic git? If you have nothing good to say, don't say anything. Chris, come here a minute, mate. Here's the thing, right? It is now 15 days since your enormous success, since we got out of the European Union. If after 15 days you want people to stop talking about it, it's possible that the prize that you thought you'd won didn't exist. Worse, it's possible, if you're so desperate for people to stop talking about it, that you're very close to admitting it was all a terrible mistake that you made. And the reason that I have to carry on talking about it is because I care for you. And I want to help you reach that happier place where, rather than saying, shut up about our brilliant victory that we really won and desperately wanted, you will instead say, oh my days, how did I fall for that? And when you say, how did I fall for that, there'll be a list of names that I don't even need to share with you. You could write it yourself. And the problem we've got, and the reason why we can't stop talking about it, is that most of the people on that list of names are currently presiding over the carnage of our government's response to the coronavirus. So, with the constant caveat that the vaccines will save us from Boris Johnson, if you'd listened to me sooner, we might, it's tough to say, but we might have avoided the political calamity post-Brexit of seeing the cheats and the liars get promoted, while the people that told the truth, well, Chris, mate, people who told the truth got abused quite nastily by people like you. So if we can forgive that, then surely you can forgive us for being right. Robin, 2 Robins today, it's like buses. This one is in Southampton. Robin, what would you like to say?
James, I so want to try and get to the position you're in, where you are able to stay calm, where you have these discussions and talk with those that have been hoodwinked and find a way to join a path to get back to normality.
Yes.
But my theory is normality is not going to come back. We talk about getting back to normal with COVID, but I think it's about getting back to normal in politics, because I don't know if you've ever seen the film The Lifetimes of Colonel Blimp. It's a just post-war movie where the...
I have seen it, but I'd struggle to describe it to you. It's a long time. I think they just showed it to us at prep school, actually.
It begins with the colonel who thinks things should be played by the rules.
Yes.
They should basically... there's an army exercise. He plays it by the rules in terms of war begins at midnight, and the opposition don't play by the rules, and they take him out at 11:30.
Ah, yes.
And I think the situation we've got now is we want to play by the rules. We want to try and get to a position where the government speaks the truth, where cabinet ministers are accountable, and we don't have them standing up in the Commons day after day lying or staying in post when they're incompetent. And I can't see that happening, because on every occasion with Brexit, they thought they could lie and get away with it because they could, because it was 2 years between having the referendum and us seeing what happened. Probably thought it would be 2 years, it's a lot longer.
Yes.
Where we would see the results of what they had said. COVID, on that time gap,
yes.
We're now seeing the lies exposed within weeks, if not days. But still manage to control the information in a way that people fall for it. And my theory is if we stop being angry about it and start being calm, then they will just wash us to one side and continue this for the next 4 years.
Well, anger then is the wrong word, because there's a rather lovely proverb here. I haven't seen it before, and I've sadly misplaced the name of the person that sent it in. But if you think of anger as a hot coal that you pick up with the intention of throwing it at somebody else, but of course it ends up sticking to your skin and burning you. So anger, I think good humour, while also insisting on facts and reality, because the only way they get away with this is by persuading everybody else to forgive them before they've admitted a mistake or a sin.
And the fact that there is so much information out there in the national press that is just supporting their position. Your voice and the voice of one or two newspapers that tries to keep it balanced and fair are lone voices in many occasions. And the fact that the title is owned by certain people who want to further their own self-interests, allowed to carry on doing that without any question, is part of the problem.
There will be a retreat. I'm not going to make any predictions about what it's going to look like, but I would tell you that I saw one comment piece online from the Telegraph that was warning, with the reference to Northern Ireland, it was warning that Brexiteers had warned about all the problems that are now happening in Northern Ireland, which I thought was an astonishing contortion. And I noticed in the Daily Mail today that one of their most prominent columnists has written a piece under the headline "So much for taking back control." It's a combination of Brexit rhetoric and coronavirus policy making. But knowing what I know about Fleet Street, Robin, I can imagine a world not too distant from where we are now in which they all just pretend none of it ever happened and they were against it all along. I said some time ago that, you know, the old myth about Woodstock, if everyone who'd been at the Woodstock Festival had actually been there, it would have broken the boundaries of America. I think Brexit might end up being like that. One of the coronavirus skeptics today has been reported of having deleted all of his stuff. They're just going to pretend they never did it, aren't they?
Well, I replied to John Redwood on Twitter the other day saying...
It's a family programme.
On the fact that he was saying that the fishing thing was all okay. And I said, look, this is all your fault. But if you were in Cabinet, you could do something about it. By the time that happens, mate, we'll be back in the EU. Because, you know, he just sits there on his millions and pushes this stuff out, and it's untrue, but very few newspapers ever pointed out.
Well, I don't get that. I've got my own theories. I've written at length about them, but I don't get that. I think it almost became intoxicating. I think they just got caught up on this, and Paul Dacre is the man who bears the most responsibility for it, the former editor of the Daily Mail. He created this environment where everyone's an enemy, even High Court judges. And you know, academia is not your friend, and knowledge and expertise are your enemy. But quite where it goes next, he's not at the Mail anymore. Although his ghost still haunts the pages of the Sunday edition very much. But the daily edition, for all its faults, is very different from what it was like in those days. I imagine they're just going to have to pretend it's not happening. I don't quite see how. I mean, what do you say to fishermen now, if you flog Brexit? And it's ended up with them being at the front of the queue of people complaining about the reality when the fantasy cast them as the biggest beneficiaries of all. 12:32 is the time. Tim Humphrey has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
12:36 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the oddly conversation about Brexit has expanded. Having started off very slowly, it's expanded to fill the entire programme, which is a mixed blessing from my point of view. I'm obviously conscious of spending the next few years resisting the urge to say I told you so at every turn with regard to Brexit, and most recently, of course, with regard to Donald Trump. I don't think, for the record, that we'll ever get a proof of the wrongness of Brexit as stark and as irrefutable as proof of Donald Trump's depravity, lying through his teeth about election results and endangering American democracy and inciting what I suppose can be described without debate as an insurrection, but whether or not it was some sort of attempted coup is a question that is still being addressed and still being asked and answered. So I don't think you're ever going to get a kind of, I mean, that's like the mother of all penny drop moments. What's the word for a massive penny drop moment? I don't think you're ever going to get a demonstration of Brexit's failings on anything like the scale that we saw a demonstration last week of Donald Trump's depravity. It pushed everybody, even remotely honest, to a position where they had to say that people who warned about what he was made of had been proven completely right. Completely right. But plenty of Americans still like him. So even if we did have a siege of the Capitol equivalent with regard to Brexit, plenty of people would still like it. It's odd, though, how many of them are desperate for us to stop talking about it. Isn't it? Why on earth if I just pulled off the biggest victory of my life, the last thing I'd want would be to stop talking about it. It's almost as if the losers are being told to stop gloating. That's a good phrase. Can you think of any other points in life where the losers are the ones that are told to stop gloating? Look, number one, we're not gloating, and number two, we're all losers. It's just that some of us realised it rather quicker than others. But isn't that hilarious? Why are you still going on about... Well, hang on a minute. Why aren't you still going on about it? Why aren't you spending every day... I saw there was a little thing on Twitter the other day, and it was directed at me. It was an ad hominem. By one of the kind of real headbangers of Brexit. And it was the cover of my book. I mentioned this to you before because it's such a beautiful illustration of just how dishonest it's all become. So my first book, How to Be Right, and then a tweet from March of an Observer article which said that Brexit may cause coronavirus vaccines to get here slower. It was obviously pithier than that, but I didn't write that. So I just retweeted the article and the headline self-generates. But the idea is that the bloke who wrote a book called How to Be Right put out a tweet in March of 2020 of a story that he had absolutely nothing to do with, but it turned out to be wrong. And that proves that he can't be trusted and that he's not reliable. And that there's a sort of desperation to cling. If you're clinging to things like that, talk about clutching at straws. That's the same mindset, I presume, that says, stop talking about it. Stop talking about our magnificent victory. Doesn't make sense, lads. If it's brilliant, you would never shut up about it. If you already want us to shut up about it, it's therefore not brilliant. One could go further. How bad does it have to be for you as you still call yourselves ardent Brexiteers? How bad does it have to be for an ardent Brexiteer to be demanding within 15 days of Brexit that we all stop talking about Brexit? So 4.5 years of rancour and division and argument, and 15 days after you finally pulled it off, you want the other lot to stop talking about it? Come on. It's the losers who are being told to stop gloating. That's just funny, right? 0342. Okay. Thank you for playing, Chris. I'm not sure that a big penny drop moment could be a pound drop moment or even a 50p drop moment. It doesn't quite have the sort of verbal pleasure that the penny drop moment has, the mother of all penny drops. Anyway, back to the phones. Talking about fish, who the hell thought that the fishermen would be the first people to break...
When you call a Dell Technologies advisor, you get to talk to someone who isn't waiting for their turn to speak, but who actually wants to hear what you have to say, so they can provide tailored solutions that don't fit every small business. They fit yours. That's what it means to really listen. For advice on everything from laptops to the cloud, Dell Technologies recommends Windows 10 Pro for Business, the most secure Windows ever. Call an advisor today on 0800 169 1745 or visit dell.co.uk/advisor.
Cover and complain furiously about Brexit. 0345 6060 973. And just by way of an aperitif for programmes we may do next week, give me a quick call now. Tell me how it's affecting your business already. We'll leave to one side the question of which problems are fixable, which problems are caused by the incompetence of the current government and can be fixed when there are better people in charge and more experts involved, and which problems are actually a currently unfixable consequence of this ludicrous deal. 0345 6060 973. And quite a few of you are asking me to remind you that Jacob Rees-Mogg has blocked scrutiny of that deal for at least 6 months. Again, if it's brilliant, why wouldn't you want us to scrutinise it? And if it's all going brilliantly, why on earth would you want us to shut up about it? Questions for the ages. If you hit the numbers now, you will get through, particularly perhaps if you're in another business that you haven't heard described yet. Like our friend who's been sending power tools to Europe and they've all been sent back again because the recipient now incurs charges. I told you ages ago that Mrs. O'Brien had some mascara delivered from Australia. And she'd ordered it without realising that the company was in Australia, which is easy to do online. And we had to go down the post office and pay a few quid to get on top of what we'd paid for the mascara and the postage. We had to go and pay a customs fee, I think it was. And I remember thinking out loud, is that what's going to... If we're a third country, will we have to do that with the European Union stuff as well? And even I thought, no. So, what have you learnt in the last 15 days that has perhaps even taken you by surprise. Back to Cornwall. Steve's in Newquay. Steve, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi.
Hello.
Hi. It was following on from was it Wolf in Hamburg, with the kind of
Yes,
how you take the fight forward.
Yes.
That trying to find a silver lining on the dark cloud of it all.
Yes.
That, in theory, a lot of the problems and thoughts and concerns of the people that voted for Brexit are based on that whole idea of British exceptionalism and the empire and us being better than everybody else.
Yes.
So as it progresses, I think it's almost likely that Scotland will leave the Union. You can probably see the reunification of Ireland. The idea of the last vestiges of the empire will be gone. The Union Jack won't be something you can hug so much. No more Team GB in the Olympics. The penny drop will be slow, but it will eventually get there.
Oh, Lord.
And then, of course, the people who put them in that position of believing it in the first place, that led to the collapse of all those things they held so dear, are the same people that, hopefully they'll be able to say, they did that to us, they told us that lie. And then the other plus, of course, is with our next battle that comes along, which is climate change.
Yes.
It tends to be that most of the Brexiteer types who told all the stuff, about bending bananas are also the ones who tend to be the more on the climate change denying side.
Yes.
And maybe if we can get rid of British exceptionalism, accept our position as a medium-sized country on the edges of Europe, look at how we deal with the rest of the world from that position rather than British exceptionalism.
So it might teach us to...
climate change deniers could be a plus.
That's quite a reach, mate, I think, isn't it?
Well, I know. I've been trying for 4 years to make that reach.
And I don't want the union to break up. I feel differently about the Irish question, but I don't personally, and I'm not going to get into big fights with Scottish nationalists, because I completely respect their position and understand it and sympathise with it a lot more now than I did before, because I can now feel what they feel when they see London and Westminster government, particularly a Tory government, treating them as fourth-class citizens. But I don't personally want to see that happen. So it's not much of a silver line. The climate change thing I'd take, but, again, 4.5 years of exposing the lies of Brexit, and still it's fair to say that the people who own the newspapers and the people with all the political power haven't admitted the truth, and that means that a huge number of people that follow them and swallow their messages won't have admitted the truth either. And third fly in the ointment of your optimism is lockdown scepticism. The crossover between lockdown skeptics talking utter bilge, utter bilge, and Brexit and climate change is pretty huge, and it doesn't appear that they've learnt anything from their previous mistakes.
Yeah. So what was the first one with the Scottish independence? I don't think any Remain voters wanted Scottish independence.
But we can't argue with it, really. It's going to be so weird to hear people trying to keep Scotland in the United Kingdom by using the same arguments that we use to try to keep the United Kingdom in the European Union. It's going to be bizarre. Anyway, I'm late for the break. Sorry, mate.
It imagines being an impossible question to answer. As far as we've had 4 years of the lies and lies. Now Brexit's happening, so the lies will become more exposed now.
Do you think? But they'll blame it all on someone else. They'll blame it on the virus. They'll blame it on Remainers. They'll blame it on Brussels. We already had a caller today blaming it on Brussels. I'm utterly unable to articulate what they've done that could be described as unfair or unpredicted, but still it doesn't matter, does it? Because feelings trump facts, and probably always will. Sorry to sound so pessimistic. 12:47 is the time.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, with James O'Brien.
12:51 is the time. Few of you pointing out, rather brilliantly, something that I managed to miss. The kind of person who is perhaps saying 15 days after Brexit, you all need to shut up about it now. People who wanted it and should be celebrating it, want everyone else to be quiet about it, are almost certainly, in many cases, the same people who still talk about us winning 2 World Wars and 1 World Cup. So 15 days, guys. Shut up about it now. 15 days. But you were still sort of cheering a military victory from over 100 years ago until you probably still are. Anyway, some other non-fish related pigeons coming home to roost. That doesn't quite work, does it? Your fish is not a pigeon. I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm going to go for Later. Is that correct? In Eastbourne?
Hello, it is. It's Latha.
Latha. What can you tell me?
Well, I'm just ringing up basically to rant about how the government lied to us about the free trade agreement. Unless I'm completely dense, this has been completely based on the large companies. We're a small company.
Yes.
And we came over from France in November 2019 to live in the UK. And in lockdown 1, we started our business up, selling antiques and collectibles. We have thousands of customers from all over the world. All our parcels have been returned. We've done everything that they wanted. We got an EURI number. We put the commodity code down. We put the detailed description down, everything. And what do? They sling it back at us and say no, because they're not ready. They're not ready to even get over the water to France.
Well,
Italy, Germany is so close.
I know, and I'm sorry. However, that is, I think, something that gets filed under fixable. Whether it gets fixed in time to help you, I do not know. But that doesn't sound to me like a permanent consequence of Brexit. It sounds like a consequence of the government's complete failure to, well, basically tell you the truth, but more pertinently in this context, prepare for the reality.
It's their incapabilities of doing something so simple. I'm not even able to get out of my pyjamas because I'm trying to sort this mess out that they've caused. 72 customers we've lost in a week. 72 and £10,000. For a small company, this is such a huge impact. I've got to the point now where I have to apply for a visa and go back to France so that I can trade in the EU.
Yes, that is a bit of a mess, isn't it? And I think, again, you remind me, and I'm sorry, when I ask my pithy questions about is this a permanent problem or a temporary problem, to people like you it may not matter, because another 2 weeks of this, and this is what I hear from the fishing fleets as well, it might well be fixable in the long term, but I'll be out of business before it gets fixed.
Well, we literally can trade for another week and that's it. That's it. Our business has gone. We've lost all this money. We were being good. We're doing everything that was asked of us. We pay our tax where necessary. We just do absolutely everything. And what do? They play with people's lives.
I've got no comfort for you, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm ranting.
No, I think
sometimes you need to vent, don't
well, that's
you?
what I'm here for, Latha. Seriously, that's what I'm here for. You can vent all you want.
Well, I just hope that they can sort this mess out before people end up with having breakdowns. Everybody's just doing their best in these unforgiving times.
And they've made everything worse than it needed to be.
We try and it's thrown back at us.
Do you not derive any comfort from the thought of fish now being British and therefore happier, as Jacob Rees-Mogg has suggested?
To be honest, about fish, I'll be blunt, I don't really care about the fish. This is my personal opinion. I'll put it in the oven and I'll eat it. I don't care if it's from Europe, from America, from the British waters. I don't care.
Can you imagine what it's like being Jacob Rees-Mogg and actually thinking either A, that it would be funny to talk about this, or B, that it was a pertinent point to suggest that somehow the nationality of an uncaught fish is a win or a benefit or a... Oh, I don't know.
I'm probably being thick here, but I don't really understand your question.
No, you're not being thick at all, Latha. It's what happens when political absurdity comes face to face with simple reality, and of course it's a stupid question. I apologise for asking it. If you're just tuning in and you are wondering what I'm talking about, then catches are rotting on docksides, deliveries are not happening, lorries are being stuck for 30 hours full of 50 grand's worth of shellfish on their way to Europe. Here is just one fisherman describing what Brexit has done to him.
My blood is boiling. There's boats tied up. There's families, fishing boats tied up. We can't get our product to the EU market because of red tape. We've been made a fool of.
And here is Jacob Rees-Mogg responding to such concerns.
The government is tackling this issue, is dealing with it as quickly as possible, and the key is we've got our fish back. They're now British fish, and they're better and happier fish for it.
Cliff's in Mitchfield. Cliff, what can you tell me?
It's not only exporters. I work for a small Spanish company that imports vending machines for high-end perfume companies and farmers, etc.
Oh, yeah.
I cannot get machines in to the country because there are so many European lorries that are no longer available because they're not coming to Britain. and I now have an extra £100 every delivery costs.
From zero?
Which we were not aware of.
From zero. When you say you weren't aware of it, how much of that is your fault?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
No, well, I don't think it is your fault, because you were told it was a free trade agreement. You were told it was going to be frictionless. You were told that absolutely nobody is talking about leaving the single market and the customs union. And the fellow who said that's just been put in the House of Lords, Cliff.
Correct. And I was being sarcastic because,
were.
yes, we did check it all out. And we issued a new price list to our clients in January. And my first delivery was meant to leave Spain earlier this week. All of a sudden, we've been told, by the way, you've got to have this to now import in, this certificate to import in. It's a vending machine at the end of the day.
Yeah, of course.
But, yeah, no, it's and it's all these extra costs. So these people sat in Parliament that's saying it's all wonderful and it's teething problems. It's not. It's important to us because now the paperwork stroke red tape might get filed just under teething problems, but the costs are permanent. Yeah.
Oh, mate, I wish you well.
And we can't pass them on, so our margins are now
and that
reduced.
threatens the viability of the business at some point, eventually.
Yes, quite possible.
I hope not, because again, and this is what I need to work on. Compassion for the contempt for the comment. It clearly is too blunt an instrument, because you don't want any businesses to fail just to help you get proved right. Although Ulf in Hamburg, with his martial arts analysis of the situation, would argue that no, you've got to. You've got to get all this suffering out as quickly and as completely as possible in order to begin the process of getting... Oh, man. Well, anyway, here's the good news, or bad news, depending on whether you're a winner or a loser. I can't imagine we're not going to be talking about Brexit a bit more in 2021 than we did in 2020, believe it or not, especially with the vaccine on the way. The only thing, I'll leave you with this thought for the weekend, the only thing now that can save us from Boris Johnson is the vaccine. That's it from me for another week. We'll do it all again on Monday morning from 10. The next voice you will hear on LBC belongs to Sheila Ferguson.